Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. Today is going to be a bit different than normal. Normally, I have a conversation with one person, and we talk about various things that are important to them, important things that they have brought, things that are on their mind. Today is going to be a little bit different because there are two guys, one of them who is a former guest, who have written a book that I think is valuable, and I'm interested in having a conversation about it. This is a book by John Flach and Adam Walls, and it's called "Do Systems Exist? A Conversation." So the methodology of the book itself is one of conversation between Adam and John, and I think you're going to find it interesting. What is different about this is that about two-thirds of the way through our conversation, we begin to talk about, so what's next? What do we do next? And you will find that we have begun to create the next step in the launch of this book, the New Systems Exist. And you will see that it will have an application here at the Eddie Network podcast. So watch how we talk about this. Watch how three guys, two of them who have written a book, and the third who is simply a podcaster who likes to ask questions, how the three of us begin to talk about what is possible if we come together and try something new. Try something that is a little bit different than what you would expect here on the Eddie Network podcast. And so I hope that you will find this episode to be interesting and very worthwhile. Hi, everyone, this is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guests today are Adam Walls and John Flach. I've known these guys for a couple of years now, and they're bright guys, and they have done something I think that's really cool. And I'm going to let them tell you about it. So welcome, guys, and tell us a little about your background and then what this little project you've done has created.
Shall I go first? Okay. I'm Adam Walls. I've been a business architect for over 20 years, and I learned system thinking, or I've been studying and learning system thinking for a similar amount of time. I was set on the track by a chap called Jeff Elliott, who tapped me on the shoulder and told me what I was doing was probably wrong. And my curiosity drove me to new lands, and in those new lands, I discovered I didn't know anything. So I've set my journey to discover what it was that I was supposed to know, discover. And I've applied it everywhere, in all sorts of places.
There will be people watching this who have never heard the term systems thinking. So maybe we ought to have a definition, and maybe John, you can give us the definition and kind of introduce yourself.
So my background is as an academic. I'm currently emeritus professor at Wright State University, but spent about 30 some years as a professor. But then when I retired from university, I worked for a software development group for a number of years, and am now retired and just doing fun things like writing books and doing some consulting. The question of what is a system, to me, it's kind of interesting. There's I just heard a reference to Prince in another context where someone said you shouldn't use that word. It doesn't mean what you think it means. And systems means a lot of things to different people, but for me, the whole idea of systems theory is a collection of tools, and they're a collection of tools that allow you to articulate your hypotheses about the world in interesting ways, and in a way that's public and that other people can test it out. But it's a way of, I think, systems, the tools of systems engineering give you a means to express hypotheses. But for me, it's not so much systems engineering, but there's a background called general systems thinking. And if you read the Akoff, who people like Akoff who started operations research, but what he discovered is their models, when they applied them to the real world, there was always leaks or gaps, and there were things in the real world that their models didn't address. And so he and people like Bertalanffy and other people, formulated general systems theory, and it was more an attitude. And it's an attitude that emphasizes that all models are wrong. Okay. Although, as the saying goes, many are very useful in communicating our ideas. And so systems is, for me, general systems thinking is a humble attitude that starts with the idea that nature is much more complex than we can possibly understand. But accepting that, we still go and try to understand it anyway. And that is our, oftentimes our models and systems and hypotheses are ways to express our efforts. But it's always, to me, the big mistake is to think that your systems, that what you think the system is actually what it is. And to me, that's the main takeaway from general systems thinking.
So we could apply Gödel's incompleteness theorem to system thinking.
It's always, yes.
Because that's the way I look at it. It's trying to identify connections and interrelationships, and you can never see the whole thing. So why in the world would you write a book about it?
I think it was to deal with the amount of conversations that we have to express exactly these views. So there are an awful lot of people in the world who believe systems are real, tangible things and they exist. And that's fine. But when you meet them and you have to explain why you think they don't, it's much easier just to give them a small book and say, that's what I think. Is that about right, John, would you say?
Well, so to just give a little bit of the background. So Fred Voorhorst, who's the illustrator of this book, Fred and I go back many years into the last century. And we've done a number of books together. And we had also, Fred's the artist and the cartoonist. And for a number of years, we've been kind of posting to LinkedIn cartoons. Fred would create the cartoon and I'd create some kind of explanation. Yeah, there's Fred.
See if I can get this. Well,
I think your background isn't helping.
Yeah, I know.
I can probably show it better here.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, mine's backwards.
Or I can do this. There you go.
There you
Fred,
go. Adam and I in the top picture. And these are some of the Fred does his acknowledgments by drawing rather than writing. So he prefers to use his artistic talents, and Adam and I are trapped in words.
That's true.
But we had been posting images and little kind of nuggets of information on LinkedIn, and Adam saw that, and I think, again, as almost everybody with our collaborations, they're engaged by Fred's cartoons.
Yeah.
And that sometimes they'll actually read what I wrote as a result of the cartoons, but mostly they're looking at the cartoons and enjoying the cartoons. And Adam was one who saw that combination, and he thought it was interesting. And he had, as he said, for many years been trying to promote systems thinking and systems thinking within industry as part of his consultant. And he had put together kind of an outline of a course that he had used. And he reached out to us and said, I would love to collaborate with you guys. And I think the main request was for Fred to illustrate his course material. But Fred and I both engaged, and that started the conversation about systems. And I don't consider myself a systems thinker. I'm a psychologist. I'm interested in human performance, but in studying human performance and I say applied cognitive science and looking at how the implications for business, for design of technology and things, it causes me to go back to first principles and to think more broadly, metaphysically. And in doing that, I've been strongly influenced by people like Gerald Weinerd's book on general system thinking and Akoff and Bertalanffy and others. So that started the conversation. And
here you are.
The book is a result of that conversation.
Well, I like the scope of the book, and I like what you have. I like the chapters you have here, and so you systems perspective, wicked change, making sense, context matters, variety is vitality, the substitution myth, emergence, coordination, distributing authority, letting organizations work. All those things are things which I find myself talking about all the time in some way. Maybe not using that language, but the ideas that are kind of embedded in those concepts are there all the time.
Well, we have to write our stories because it's the only way that this information gets transmitted.
Mm-hmm.
And the act of putting it into a book is finite. It's final. This is what we think. Words are free, but books aren't. There's a lot of work goes into creating them, and to go through all that effort, you're making a statement. And we're making a statement. Well, I'm John as well. We're making a statement about those things, that we believe that certain things about those things are true, and evidence-based. And because of that, that opens the conversation to a huge number of subjects. Just the conversation around requisite variety. And requisite variety is the law of gravity. It's as substantial as the law of gravity. And yet, when I ask people, do they know the law of requisite variety? Of course they don't.
Yeah.
And yet, everybody should be taught that, because if they were taught that, then a lot of stuff wouldn't make any sense, like call centers, for example. But they do, because nobody has taught that stuff.
And just one comment.
So we sure.
No, you say that books are not for free, but this one is almost for free. So
yeah,
we're not taking any profit on it. So if you go to Amazon and buy the book, you're just paying and whatever Amazon overhead gets to Amazon. So but we also you can also access a free PDF either from there are links on LinkedIn. And there's also my blog set. So we want to share, I think both Adam and I, ultimately, the motivation is to teach and to share these ideas. So
exactly.
Part of the reason to write a book is you're vain enough to think you have thoughts that other people might be useful to somebody besides yourself. And so you want to share it. And, that's why you put the effort into creating a book or teaching a course.
Or it's a way of sharpening your perception of what you think you know, and until you actually put it in words and have it edited and printed, you don't really know precisely. When I published my first book, and we're talking now 7 years ago, in the 9 months after I turned the manuscript in and it was finally published, it went through 6 or 7 editings. I still find problems, and so the kind of the rule of thumb is a book is never finished; it's just abandoned. So, but
Exactly.
what it does is I mean, what I see you
Yeah,
doing here is having a conversation between each other that you're trying to invite other people to join you in this conversation. And I think that's really very,
exactly that.
very important. And
Yeah, and for me, it's important that people understand this is not an answer book. It's not a how-to book. It's actually a question book. And I th I think part of the spirit of general systems thinking is because of the complexity of nature and because it's always changing and things, you know, we don't have answers that are going to apply universally or in the future. And so if we want to prepare people to deal with that complexity, we have to help them to frame the questions. And it's up to them to discover the answers. But I think there is something we can learn from the people like Akoff and Bertalanffy and others about how to frame questions that lead to productive answers or results, or at least gives you promising directions, particularly if you're trying to improve organizational performance or human performance.
is there a question or two that lives with you all the time, that constantly emerges in all the experiences you have, the encounters you have with people, with other theories and other work and stuff? Are there kind of universal questions that you find are important for people to not so much find the final answer to, but actually to kind of hold as these are the questions that really drive where we go in life?
For me, the first question is, does this person think it's real?
Uh-huh.
Do they think what they think is real? And if they think it's real, then there has to be another stage in the conversation, which
Hmm.
takes them to a place when they recognize a little bit of humility, that it may not be real, or at least it's real for them. So many people believe that people think the way they do, and yet how could that be? How could it be? So that's probably my first question ever. Do you think this is real? Do you think what you think is real? Or is there any room? Is there any room for conversation about this?
Hmm.
This is why I say systems aren't real, because they're in your head. They're just things people make up. And I can argue all day with the systems engineer that they're engineering a system. But as soon as we get into and how does that impact the world, it doesn't work anymore, because is that the system? What's the system? Also, people who say the system.
I use
Yeah, so
that language all the time.
yeah, for me, my background is psychology, and I grew up at a time where the dominant views were kind of information processing theory, and which was essentially cataloging all the limitations of humans, memory limitations, attentional limitations, irrational decision making, and the message was that in most organizations, humans are the weak link. And there's kind of implications, and this is particularly important today when people are trying to sell AI as a replacement or a much more as a more reliable agent than people. But for me, I've been all my career going against that stream. And to me, humans are incredibly creative, and they're the most important, most valuable thing in an organization. And much of my career is looking at human experts and trying to understand how humans experts can do things that are beyond the capacity of mere humans. So when you look at a top athlete, when you look at a top musician, when you look at a grandmaster chess player, I mean they see things that are well beyond the capacity, and in organizations, this one of the implications of this humans as a collection of limitations is that managers tend to see that they have to protect the organization against the variability of these people, these weak people, these, and if I don't control them, they're not going to work. If I don't, but what my own thought is people are incredibly creative. They're highly motivated, that if you let people be creative and do the right thing, that they're an incredible source of adaptive capacity in organizations. And that's, gets us back to the idea that Adam made about requisite variety. So if your organization is facing complex problems, which have near infinite variety, your best resource is a variety of perspectives in your company. The people you have in the front end and the sharp end of the organization are the best resource you have for being an adaptive, resilient organization. And so I mean, that's the theme of my whole career, is emphasizing the value that people bring to organizations.
I'm developing these to me are principles in the book. Professor Mike Jackson wasn't keen on me calling them principles because he thought they weren't, and we had a debate about that. But because I treat them, this is ground level, I can start to build things on it, and so far those things are fairly resilient. I'm using the viable systems model right now in developing new ways of communicating across businesses, and that's purely based in requisite variety. It's creating the requisite variety necessary for this thing to flex. Because for some weird reason, business went the other way and said, what we really need is to restrict all variety into little tiny boxes with a couple of words. And if we join those up with arrows, indicate that work travels that way, work will work that way. But that's not how work works. If I do that, if I go to I went to an analyst in a big data company, and I mapped their world in terms of how many people supplying inputs, how many processes, how many outputs to who. And when you multiply all those together, you get a number of about 750,000. Say, well, theoretically, there's 750,000 different interactions you could be involved in any one day. We'll say 90% of those never happen. Okay, it's only 75,000. So out of those 75,000 interactions, which one is it that you want to process map for? And then it starts to become real. But you go, okay, so if I just map one of those and the other 74,990 of them don't get mapped, does that mean that that's the only one that happens? No, of course not. That work still happens. The thing will always obey the law of requisite variety. All that stuff will still happen. It'll just happen somewhere else, and probably at greater cost than that person just doing it themselves in the first place. This is probably my guiding principle right now.
It's exactly what I've seen in my career of doing leadership work. Precisely what I say. And the larger the organization, the more I saw it. Because these organizations are so complex, they are very much dependent on the people being responsible and doing good work. So I came up with this line that I use all the time. And I mean, it just explains everything to me. The line goes, there is a persistent residual culture of values that persists because it resides in the relationships of the people.
And along those lines, I mean, again, with what I said, that one of the most satisfying things in the collaboration with Adam is his stories of going into organizations, and over again, what he found is if you ask people and you listen to people, diverse people at all levels of the organization, you can find answers. And the answers, most interesting, because it's a distributed organizations, the answers are often not at the manager level or the director level. Many Many of the answers are at the sharp end, or the people who are actually interacting and interfacing with that external variety. The people who are dealing with customers, who are dealing with the day in, day out variety, oftentimes they know what the problems are. And oftentimes when in unhealthy organizations, the problem is the managers and directors are not talking to those people and are not accepting the explanations rather than listening to the workers and trying to understand the problems from their perspective. The managers are too often trying to impose their model of what they think how things should work on the people who are doing the work. And oftentimes by imposing those constraints, they're actually making the work harder for people rather than easier. And they're making the organization more brittle rather than more resilient by doing
But
that.
it kind of has to be that way because organizations are organized that way.
Yeah.
Right at the top, you have the CEO.
Yeah.
Everything under the CEO is a silo. And it's defined by budget, by title, by expertise, by personality, by not just walls. It's a rigid, siloed structure for your organization. You have a CFO, you have a CFO silo, you have a finance silo. And so if we look at just one of these rules, right? One of these things that Ashby said, you need a good regulator model, right? So if you have a system, something has to regulate the system, and that needs a model of the system within it to regulate. Okay, who's that in an organization? Who's got the model of the whole thing? The CEO? Absolutely not.
Never.
So nobody then. Maybe the enterprise architect, ironically, is the closest you've got. But they don't understand business. And as Descartes said, if it can't be measured, it's religion. And business cannot be measured. But as soon as you try to measure business, you influence what happens, and therefore it's not a good measurement system. So it fails MSA. There's no way to measure business that doesn't impact the performance of the business in that direction. Because you're measuring people.
What I found in my work was that when the CEO or the president or the general manager, whoever's the top dog, decided that they were helpless without their people and that they were going to support their people and that they were going to build relationships with them, that was when things got really exciting and peaceful at the same time. I worked with one guy who came into a large company, who's a new guy, and he didn't say anything about his agenda for 4 months. And then he invited me in to write a value statement. But by the time I got there, everybody liked him because they all had a personal relationship with him. Because he made a point to spend those first 4 months going around and meeting people where they work. And then therefore he had a clear idea of what was going on with the company than the board ever told him. And it was impressive.
But if we take the same, Descartes said, if it can't be measured, it's religion. If it can be measured, it's science. And IT can be measured. And therefore IT is science and business is religion. And right there is the problem. Whether you call it culture or religion, it's a belief system. And the belief system is far more powerful than any influences, even regulatory influences. Businesses will go bust because of their belief system. I mean, so they'll go off cliffs.
So from a systems perspective, how do you bring those two together? I mean, obviously I think you're implying that they need to be married together so that they support one another. But how do you?
Viable systems model. So Stafford Beer back in 72 to define the viable systems model, which is in the book. And it's essentially, there are 5 things that have to happen inside you for you to adapt to the environment. You have to be able to see stuff coming. You have to have some sort of control of all your resources. You have to have some sort of coordination in the world and some sort of way of interacting with the world and some sort of idea of who you are and why you're here. Well, those 5 things are the same in every viable system. The thing is, they must communicate flawlessly, and that's not a hierarchy. These are just 5 things that have to communicate with each other flawlessly. So I go into anything, any area of chaos in a business and just implement one of those. Just identify the 5 people, get them talking about the right things. Start that communication. What will emerge is a viable system. Because the guy who's looking out will be looking at all the other stuff going, well, let's do it over there as well. And then that'll happen. And it'll be a viral thing. So if you want to connect the two, you have to start with trying to get some grounding in your model based in reality, not based in proverbs or myths or rumors, but based in reality. What are the 5 things that you must do? Those 5 things. So go and do those 5 things there. Make sure they're happening. And ask the people who are doing those 5 things, how worried should we be about the things you're doing? And they'll tell you.
And that's the fun part.
And right there, you have your list of priorities of things that you need to go and sort out.
So, the problem with Ashby is that nobody has the full model.
No.
And so, so Ashby's law works for airplanes. So if you want to design an autopilot, you've got to know the dynamics of an airplane. But it doesn't work for air traffic control systems. When you have social systems, when you have organizations, now nobody has the full model. And so the question is not how you make the organization work. The question is how you let the organization work. And so what we know since Ashby is there's been a lot of work on self-organization. So bees build these nests, termites build these organized nests, and they don't have a director. They don't have somebody telling people, they don't have plans. Okay, but they do have is communication. So they lay down pheromone grotids and they can see, and they have direct interaction, so they can see what people are doing. And I think really important work that we cite later in the book is Elinor Ostrom's work. And what Elinor got the Nobel Prize for work on the tragedy of the commons. And so one of the assumptions has always been that, if you don't have a government regulation, a central regulator, and you have a common resource, everybody's going to try to maximize their thing and they're going to destroy the resource. But Elinor found that in indigenous cultures and in many places in the world, people solved the tragedy of the commons, avoided the tragedy of the commons based on bottom-up interactions, based on self-organization. Mm-hmm. And the key there, and I also think it's fundamental to the attitude of general system thinking is you've got to communicate. The people have to communicate. And that's the key, Ed, your story. I mean, the CEO communicated with the people. And when you listen to Adam's stories, almost every situation where there's problems and that seemed insurmountable was failures of communications, failures of managers to talk to workers, failures of managers to talk to other managers and other stovepipes, failures of CEOs to listen to the managers, to talk to the people on the thing. It's always so. If you try to, the problem is when you try to control top down, it's always going to be brittle because it's only as good as the model of the controller. And that model is always going to be trivial relative to the real complexities. So, but again, termites organized, they don't have a central controller. They don't have to have a central model, but they have to have the communication among themselves. They have to be able to lay pheromone gradients around. They have to be able to smell. They have to know what the other insects are doing. And the problem is in our pursuit of control and our pursuit of organization, there's been incredibly centralization within their companies. And the companies have got more and more complex, and what they've done in the exactly wrong thing is to address that complexity, they've become more and more centralized, more and more expert relation, more and more power. They think they can overcome requisite variety by more power. Well, more power doesn't do it. More power just drives you to instability if you don't have the communication and the information to address the requisite variety.
I'm going to ask the most obvious question imaginable, but how did we end up here? How did this become the way we do things?
There's a great book by John Ralston Saul called Voltaire's Bastards. And I think
the book here.
I think the way I interpret his explanation of what happened is it all goes back to Harvard Business School, and it goes back to the idea of spreadsheets. And the idea is, and again, this is where systems theory gets bastardized or misused. That is, when you believe that, when you say something like, it's got to go into the spreadsheet. If it's not countable, if it can't go in my spreadsheet, then that doesn't exist. That's a recipe for disaster. And so what you have, and what the story Saul tells, is about organizations. They hire business consultants. They come in with their spreadsheets. They maximize short-term payoffs. But in the process, anything, value of the workers, the morale, these things don't go in your spreadsheet. There's no place in the spreadsheet for those things. And in the process of maximizing the returns in their spreadsheets, they destroy the communications, the trust, the things that make companies successful. And the sad part of the story is that these people often go in, drive up profits early, give a lot of big return to investors, and then they get hired away to another company to do the same way somebody else, but they leave behind a hollowed out, empty company that then fails. So the Voltaire's bastards for many years, for the last 100 years, have been rewarded for destroying value in these companies. And it's still happening. I think you might see a little bit of this in the U.S. politics today.
Yeah. I mean, I have many stories of businesses destroying value. I haven't seen a decent merger yet. I've been involved in 5, is it, or 6, and they've all been done really, really badly, and have destroyed massive amount of value for both sides of the equation. Just dumb stuff, not thinking about how you communicate to people, telling people that everything changed without ever justifying it or giving any rationale. It's the mishandle that I would say is probably the biggest expense a business ever has. It's not their products and services. It's how they handle their people.
Do you feel like that we're moving towards a point of where there is very little opportunity for recovery from this kind of thinking?
No, of course not. We have to move forward.
Well, yeah, requisite variety is going to win, right?
Yeah, always.
so it's going to,
But we need to say that. I mean, it's not like, oh yeah, well, of course it. I think we have to make the case for that, though.
Yeah. Well, the natural system, the requisite variety will, the people who don't adapt are going to be extinct, and the people who adapt are going to go on and survive. So, it's the world's going to go long after Voltaire's bastards are dead. The world will continue.
Oh, I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say the next generation, it'll be probably the most exciting since, I don't know, the early 20th century.
We thought we were going to be, didn't we? Didn't we think we were going to be a great generation?
No, I never thought that. No, but you see, I'm the outsider. But, and Yeah. And I saw things I didn't like, and I've seen things I didn't like all my life. It's not that I was
Yeah,
negative or overly critical. I just recognize that whatever we're doing doesn't work, and it's going to have a long-term negative impact upon things. But you reach a point where people, um, there's a statement from Solzhenitsyn who says, um, you can take once you take everything away from the man, he, he is now free, and you no longer have any claim upon him. And I feel
absolutely true.
that's where we're going, and
Mm.
that people are recognizing that they have some freedom to go start things and to be things and to change their outlook. And I've never been more excited about what looks like the future than I am right now. Which
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the dinosaurs have to die for the mammals to thrive,
Yeah, it's really true.
and it's space. So, one generation, the people who don't learn from their mistakes are going to extinguish themselves, and the people who learn from the mistakes are going to thrive in the next round.
May
Do
I
you know
have
what I hope for this? Sorry, Ed, I hope for this book that it kind of becomes required reading. I never want to make any money out of this book, but I want everybody to have read it because I think it should just be required reading, even if you disagree. Just action is an important life step, I think.
Well, let me offer a thought to you. I mean, you both have Hollywood star quality. No, no, I'm joking.
Is that an insult?
No,
I don't know. I was trying to figure that out.
it's setting up what I want to say to you. I think it would be of real value for you two, to do some video work on this, and be yourselves in this, because I think it is providing insight that people need to hear. And sometimes they need to hear it orally or visually in terms of a video. And, and I think that it's not that you're going to compete against the TikTok uh, skimpy dressed dancers for influence. It's that you're competing against the people who are not doing anything, and
Mm,
that's the exciting thing, is that anybody. I mean, I've been doing this now for a long time, um, and I have none of that star quality. I know that I'm just a guy, and you are too. But we have something to say, and that something to say is something that is authentic, and people are looking for things that are authentic. And this book is authentic, and I think it's
it
great.
is.
And I don't know how to help you more.
Well, Ed, that's why we're here.
I know that.
Yeah,
So I
it
think
is.
more
No.
people interviewing you would be good. And if I mean let's I mean, this is the kind of way I think. What if what if we did I mean, we could do a series right here on the podcast, and we go through, say, half of the three or four of the specific ideas, and you all are presenting this
Sure.
in a much more learning mode. I mean, we could do that here. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, I've
I'd be I'd be up for that.
Yeah, I'm up for it.
So,
Let's do it.
so if you want to go through chapter by chapter with us, and
Yeah, be happy to.
I would like it not to be us lecturing about the book, but actually just bringing you into the conversation, so that we could do a series
yeah,
of these blogs just like this, where we talk, but we, instead of talking about systems writ large, we could break it down kind of in the structure that Adam gave us for the chapters.
okay, I'm all for that, and we could really do that fairly quickly. I mean, if we, but I'm not thinking
Okay.
out, 10 hours. I'm not thinking that. I'm thinking 20 to 30-minute segments.
Yeah.
Even
Okay.
20 is better. And then all of a sudden we have um, a resource bank of ideas that no one else has created yet. Um, and I think I'd love to see if we could do that.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I'm here. I'm in.
so we'll figure that
I'm
out.
in. I'll read the first chapter in preparation so I can remember it.
Well, I will read through this and I'll take some notes and um, I'll just respond to what I see in the book, and that's what I'll do. And then we can
Yeah.
figure
Perfect.
out how to structure something.
Perfect.
And
Yeah. If what I suggest is take chapter by chapter, and then you write some questions that you have for that
okay,
chapter ahead of time. Send it to us, give us a chance to think about it, and then in 20 minutes we can focus on that question.
Perfect. There you go.
this I like this idea. And my feeling is we I mean we could do this in a fairly short order if you're willing to do
Yeah,
that.
well, I'm willing. If you're flexible,
There's no time like the
John,
present.
then okay.
Um,
Not right now because I have to go and eat because I haven't eaten all day. But we could do it if you can schedule whatever you need, and then we can just do that. That'll be fine.
okay, well
Do you want to read the book first?
yes, I'm going to read the book, but I'll read it
Yeah.
over the weekend. Now
Yeah, you will. Yeah.
here's what I want to say. Here's the last thing I want to say, or want to ask of you. So, what actually do you want people to do with this book? And I have a couple of thoughts about that, but I want to hear what you want. Obviously, you want them to read it, but what is it that would be for you the ideal response to them reading your book?
For me, discussion, interaction with other people, discussing the things in the book.
Okay.
Because, like trying to emerge a viable system by starting the right conversations, this is it, really. This is just an attempt to start the right conversations. The people read it and go, "That's really interesting. Actually, I thought, great. Now we can talk." Somebody with thoughts or opinions or views, some community getting together to talk about it, that sort of stuff. I think that people going to study system thinking should probably read this first, because at least then they can perceive the approaches through the lens that maybe systems are not real. Because the biggest challenge we have is the system thinkers who've spent all their money and time learning system thinking, but didn't start with the understanding that it was all in their head. They thought they were building real things out there in the world. And
Same thing with leadership, the idea of leadership. It's the same
we
thing.
still argue with them today.
Yeah. Okay. Are you all
Yeah.
planning to interact with academic people? Is
Well,
that
so that's interesting you asked that, because what more than anything, what I wanted to get out of this book is to talk to non-academic people.
yeah. I agree.
So the problem. So I've lived my life in academia, and we tend to talk to each other, and it's not an accident that when people say it's academic, what they really mean is irrelevant.
Okay.
And so for me, the only way to really test these academic ideas is to test them against the experiences of people who are out there trying to manage large organizations and succeed. And so, it's part of the reason that we started collaborating with Fred is because I thought his cartoons would help broaden the audience. And then, Adam's experience brings in the business community, and it opens up, I mean, I would say probably before Adam and I started talking on LinkedIn, probably there was zero intersection between our followers. Okay. And mine were probably almost all academic or research oriented, and Adam's are business and management people. And I mean, there probably was a small sliver of intersection between the two sets, but the goal in this book is to actually put some of these ideas to test in the hands of people who are actually struggling with organizations. We're not talking about organizations, but actually managing organizations, that building things. And that's the only, I'm never going to build a company. I'm never going to be a CEO. So I need to, the only way I can test my ideas is to get the opinions of people who are actually doing the work and living it.
That's great. I think what I'm also going to do is I'm going to do an introduction to this podcast, this episode, because I think what we've discovered is that there's something more here than simply you're just my guest for another hour to, there's something that we want to invest in. And I think it's really, really important. So I'm gonna put a little intro on this, and then I'm not sure when it'll come out, but we'll have an opportunity to talk some more. And
perfect.
And I think you'll have plans.
And I'm going to do my best to twist Fred's arm and get him to engage with this too. If we do the
yeah, that would be great.
I tell you what would be,
Fred.
What would be really good is if Fred provided the JPEGs for this, and that we could use his of pictures in this process. And
but I think the important thing, I would think we want Fred in on the conversation.
Yes.
And it's not clear, partly because of Fred's humility, but Fred had a lot to do with the ideas in this book, a lot more than just pictures. And he has another whole set of experiences. So Fred's background is in industrial design engineering. So he's actually managing software products and building software products for large organizations. And so it would be great to have his perspective. He won't say much, but he will, when we say something really stupid, he will let everybody else know.
He'll point it out.
Yeah.
So when we do this, I'm gonna find another place to record this, because I'm having issues with my internet today. So we'll make sure this is seamless, and it'll be valuable, and it'll be a reference that people can turn to for decades to come. So thank you, guys.
Perfect.
Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you so much, Ed. Thanks, John. Great to see you.
So the book is working because, Ed, now you've engaged in the conversation, and so you're part of the book now.
I know.
You are.
I'm glad to do that. And so thank you, guys, and thank you all for watching. And you now know there's something coming that you're going to want to be a part of, and we'll look forward to sharing some stuff with you as this unfolds. This is the magic of social media. So we can do whatever we want to do, whenever we want to do it, for whatever reason we want to do it, and make a difference that really matters. That's what we're doing here. So thank you, and we'll see you all next time. Oh, yes, John?
I just want to say, the only way to address requisite variety is to have friends with lots of talents. So we've got Fred's artistry, we've got your podcast, we've got Adam's business experience, and also have an academic perspective. So, as this, hopefully, our requisite variety internals this conversation will increase.
Yes, I'm excited. Okay, we'll see you all next time here on the Eddie Network Podcast.
All right.
I hope you've enjoyed my conversation with Adam Walls and John Flach, as we talk about, do systems exist? I think it's an important conversation, and we would like to expand that. So we're planning to record a series of short videos, probably 15 to 20 minutes, on each of the chapters of the book. Do systems exist? A conversation. Because we would like to have a conversation with you. What we're going to do is we're going to record these over the next several weeks, month, and then we'll begin sometime this summer to post them once a week. And they'll be short. They'll be, I think the way I'm looking at what we're going to do, it'll be about 20 minutes each. They'll have a short introduction about the chapter itself. There'll be some conversation about what it means, and then there'll be a short explanation of how this chapter, the chapter that we're talking about that day, can be applied in the situations that you are in. I think this would be very, very valuable because I think we'll find over the next 5 to 10 years that the question of systems is going to become a greater one, because so much of the rationale for what is done today is based on system thinking or system theory or systems dynamics, whatever the term that you use in your work. These are going to be questions that are going to have a greater resonance going forward into the future. So over the next few weeks, we're going to record these videos and we'll begin to post them probably, as I look at this, probably in July. I think that gives us plenty of time to do 10 episodes, and so these will be 10 episodes of the Eddy Network podcast, and probably will post every Thursday, but that is yet to be determined. So there's a lot of planning that still needs to go into this, but you can expect for us to create this series because I think it'll be valuable to you, and maybe there'll be other series that other guests on the show will say, well, that looked like that worked well. Why don't we do something like this? So I welcome that opportunity. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time here on the Eddy Network podcast. Bye-bye.